The warm Los Angeles evening air felt good on Ronda Rousey's skin as she stepped out of the black car. She looked different tonight. Instead of her usual fighting clothes, she wore a beautiful blue dress with a flowing skirt that moved gently in the breeze. Her blonde hair was styled nicely, and she had put on makeup for the special event. This was not just any regular night for Ronda. She was attending the Children's Hospital charity dinner, one of the biggest events of the year in Los Angeles. Famous people, business leaders, and community helpers all came together to raise money for sick children. Ronda felt proud to be part of something so important. As she walked toward the fancy hotel entrance, camera flashes went off everywhere. Photographers shouted her name, trying to get her attention for the perfect picture. Ronda smiled and waved, but she was careful with her steps. Walking in high heels was much harder than fighting in the ring. Ronda, over here, called out fans who had been waiting outside for hours just to see her. She stopped and took time to sign autographs and take pictures with them. These moments meant a lot to her. These people supported her through all her fights, both the wins and the losses. Inside the hotel, the main ballroom looked amazing. Crystal lights hung from the ceiling, creating sparkles of light everywhere. Round tables covered with white cloth filled the room. Each table had beautiful flower arrangements and candles that gave off a soft, warm glow. Ronda had been to many fancy events, but this one felt special. She had grown up without much money, and seeing all this beauty still amazed her. She remembered being a young girl, watching her mother train for judo competitions, never imagining she would one day be the guest of honor at events like this. The charity organizer, Mrs. Patterson, a kind woman in her 60s, rushed over to greet Ronda. "Oh my goodness, you look absolutely beautiful tonight," she said with a big smile. "Thank you so much for coming. The children at the hospital are going to be so excited to hear you were here." Ronda felt warm inside when she heard this. "Thank you for inviting me," she replied. "I'm happy to help the kids in any way I can." Mrs. Patterson led Ronda around the room, introducing her to different people. There was Dr. Martinez, who worked at the Children's Hospital. There was Mr. Johnson, a businessman who donated a lot of money to help sick children. There was also Sarah, a young nurse who told Ronda amazing stories about how brave the children were. "Some of these kids watch your fights from their hospital beds," Sarah explained. "They say you inspire them to be strong and never give up. You mean more to them than you know." This made Ronda feel emotional. Fighting had always been about more than just winning for her. It was about showing people, especially women and girls, that they could be strong and powerful. As the evening went on, Ronda moved through the crowd easily. She talked with doctors, laughed with other celebrities, and listened to stories from people who worked with children every day. Everyone was friendly and respectful. The atmosphere felt safe and comfortable. The security for the event was provided by local police officers. Some were on duty, standing at doors and watching the crowd. Others were off duty but had been hired to help keep everyone safe. Ronda noticed them around the room. They looked professional in their uniforms, and most of them nodded respectfully when she walked by. One group of officers stood near the back of the room. They had been talking and laughing together most of the evening. Ronda had seen them looking in her direction a few times, but she didn't think much of it. People often stared at celebrities at events like this. During dinner, Ronda sat at the head table with other important guests. The food was delicious and the conversation was interesting. People shared stories about the amazing work being done at the Children's Hospital. They talked about new treatments that were helping kids get better and new programs that made hospital stays less scary for young patients. After dinner, there were speeches. The hospital director talked about how the money raised tonight would help buy new equipment. A young patient, a brave 10-year-old girl named Emma, even spoke about how the doctors and nurses had helped her get better. When Emma mentioned that Ronda Rousey was her hero, the whole room clapped loudly. Ronda felt tears in her eyes as she stood up to wave at Emma. This was why she did events like this. This was what really mattered. As the formal program ended, people began to move around the room again. Some went to the silent auction tables to bid on donated items. Others gathered in small groups to continue conversations. The mood was relaxed and happy. Ronda found herself near the auction tables looking at items that people could bid on. There were signed sports items, vacation packages, and artwork donated by local artists. She was particularly interested in a children's art display, showing pictures drawn by kids in the hospital. She was bending down slightly to read the names of the young artists when she felt someone approach from behind. At first she thought it might be another guest wanting to talk or take a picture. She had gotten used to people approaching her at events. The room was full of laughter and conversation. Music played softly in the background. Everything seemed normal and peaceful. Ronda felt relaxed and happy. She had no idea that in just a few seconds her peaceful evening was about to change completely. The group of police officers she had noticed earlier was now much closer. They had been drinking and talking, and their behavior had become more casual as the evening went on. What they were about to do would shock everyone in the room and create a moment that would be talked about for years to come. Ronda continued looking at the children's artwork, completely unaware of what was about to happen. She was thinking about Emma's brave speech and feeling grateful to be part of such a meaningful event. The last thing on her mind was that she might need to use her fighting skills at a charity dinner for children. Officer Mike Thompson had been on the police force for 8 years. Tonight he was working security at the charity event, but he was off duty and had been drinking wine with dinner. He stood with 3 of his fellow officers near the back of the ballroom, watching the fancy people move around. "Look at all these rich folks," said Officer Davis, shaking his head. "Spending more on one dinner than I make in a month." "Yeah, but it's for a good cause," replied Officer Martinez. "And hey, we get to see celebrities up close. That's pretty cool." Mike's eyes kept going back to Ronda Rousey. She was the most famous person at the event, and he had been a fan of her fighting for years. He had watched all her big matches on TV and always bragged to his friends about how tough she was. "I can't believe Ronda Rousey is actually here," Mike said to his friends. "She's even prettier in person than on TV." "Yeah, but she could probably kick all our butts at the same time," laughed Officer Johnson. "Remember that fight where she won in like 14 seconds? The officers had been talking about Ronda all evening. They made jokes about her fighting skills and wondered if she was as tough in real life as she was in the ring. The wine had made them feel more brave and silly than usual. "I bet she's not that tough when she's all dressed up like a regular lady," Mike said, looking at Ronda's pretty dress and high heels. "She looks like any other girl at a fancy party right now." "Are you crazy?" Officer Davis said. "She could still throw you across this room even in that dress." But Mike was feeling confident. The wine had made him think he was funnier than he really was. He had always been the joker of the group, the one who played pranks and made everyone laugh. Tonight he wanted to do something that would make a good story later. "Watch this," Mike said with a grin. "I'm going to play a little joke on the tough fighter girl. Nothing mean, just something funny." His friends looked at him with worry. "Mike, that's probably not a good idea," Officer Martinez said. "She's a guest here and we're supposed to be working." "Oh, come on, it'll be harmless," Mike replied. "What's the worst that could happen? She gets embarrassed for a second? Big deal, she's tough, right? She can handle a little joke." Officer Johnson pulled out his phone. "If you're really going to do something stupid, I'm at least going to record it," he said. This could be funny. The other officers tried to talk Mike out of it, but he was already walking toward Ronda. In his mind, he thought he was being playful and fun. He had seen pranks like this in movies and on TV shows, where everyone laughed afterward and became friends. Mike didn't think about how wrong it was to touch someone without permission. He didn't think about how Ronda might feel scared or angry. He only thought about getting a reaction and making his friends laugh. Ronda was still looking at the children's artwork when Mike approached from behind. She was reading about a drawing made by a 7-year-old boy who was fighting cancer. The picture showed superheroes helping sick kids, and it made her smile. The room around them was still full of people talking and laughing. Nobody was paying attention to what was about to happen. The other guests were busy with their own conversations and activities. Mike got closer to Ronda, moving quietly so she wouldn't notice him. His friends watched from across the room, some of them still trying to wave him back. But Mike was determined to go through with his plan. He reached out his hand toward the bottom of Ronda's flowing blue dress. In his mind, he would quickly lift the hem of her skirt just a little bit, maybe take a picture, and then everyone would laugh about it. He thought Ronda would probably laugh too, once she realized it was just a harmless joke. Mike had no idea that Ronda Rousey had spent years training to react instantly to any kind of physical threat or unwanted touch. He didn't know that her body was like a weapon that could respond faster than most people could think. He also didn't understand that what he was about to do wasn't funny at all. It was wrong, disrespectful, and could be considered assault, but the wine had clouded his judgment. and his desire to impress his friends had made him do something incredibly stupid. As Mike's hand got closer to Ronda's dress, Officer Davis back at their table shook his head. "This is going to end badly," he whispered to the others. Mike has no idea what he's about to start. The music continued to play softly in the background. People continued their conversations about charity work and helping children. The hotel staff moved around the room, cleaning up dinner plates and refilling wine glasses. Nobody in the room knew that in just a few seconds, everything would change. The peaceful charity dinner was about to become the scene of an incident that would be talked about in police departments, fighting gyms, and on social media for months to come. Mike reached out and grabbed the hem of Ronda's skirt. He quickly lifted it up a few inches and held it there for a moment, expecting to hear laughter from his friends and maybe a surprised giggle from Ronda. Instead, what happened next would teach Mike and everyone watching a lesson they would never forget about: respect, boundaries, and what happens when you mess with someone who has spent their whole life learning how to defend themselves. The moment Mike's hand touched her dress, Ronda's entire body knew something was wrong. Years of training kicked in instantly, and her peaceful evening at a children's charity was about to become something completely different. The moment Mike's hand touched the fabric of her dress, Ronda's body knew something was terribly wrong. It didn't matter that she was at a charity dinner. It didn't matter that she was wearing a pretty dress and high heels. Her body had been trained for years to recognize danger, and right now every alarm bell in her system was going off. Ronda had started learning judo when she was just 11 years old. Her mother, Anne Maria de Mars, had been an Olympic judo champion and had taught Ronda that her body was her own. Nobody had the right to touch her without permission, ever. Through years of training, Ronda had learned to feel even the smallest touch on her body. In judo, you had to know instantly when someone was trying to grab you, push you, or throw you. Your life could depend on how fast you could react. Now, standing in this fancy ballroom, those same skills were taking over. The feeling of someone lifting her dress without permission sent a shock through her entire nervous system. Her brain immediately went into fight mode, but this wasn't just about fighting skills. This was about something much deeper. As a woman, Ronda had dealt with unwanted attention many times in her life. She had been touched, grabbed, and bothered by men who thought they could do whatever they wanted because she was famous. Each time it happened, she had to make a choice. She could ignore it like many women did. She could complain to security and hope they would help, or she could handle it herself. Tonight, her body made the choice for her. The touch felt wrong in every possible way. It was sneaky and cowardly, coming from behind when she wasn't looking. It was disrespectful, treating her like she was just an object for someone's entertainment. It was also illegal, even if the person doing it thought it was just a joke. Ronda's muscles started to tense up even before her mind fully understood what was happening. Her shoulders shifted slightly. Her weight moved to the balls of her feet. Her hands, which had been relaxed at her sides, began to form loose fists. All of this happened in less than a second. Mike, still holding the hem of her dress and grinning at his friends, had no idea that he had just awakened something very dangerous. Ronda's training had taught her to recognize different types of attacks. There were grabs from the front, grabs from the side, and grabs from behind. Each one required a different response. What Mike was doing felt like an attack from behind, and Ronda's body was already preparing to deal with it. But there was something else happening too. Ronda was angry. Not just annoyed or upset, but truly angry. She had come to this event to help sick children. She had dressed up nicely and spent her evening talking to doctors and nurses who worked hard to save lives. She had listened to brave kids tell their stories and had felt proud to be part of something good. And now some man thought it was okay to treat her like a joke. He thought her body was something he could touch whenever he wanted, just for his own entertainment. The anger mixed with her training created something powerful and scary. Ronda began to turn around, and as she did, her body was already planning what to do next. Her years in the Olympics had taught her to stay calm under pressure. Even when she was angry, even when someone was trying to hurt her, she had learned to think clearly and move with purpose. Mike was still laughing, still holding her dress, still completely unaware of what was about to happen to him. His friends across the room were starting to look worried. Officer Davis had put his hand over his eyes, afraid to watch what came next. As Ronda turned, she could see Mike clearly for the first time. He was a big man, probably outweighing her by 60 or 70 pounds. He was wearing a police uniform, which made what he was doing even worse. He was supposed to protect people, not bother them. But size didn't matter to Ronda. She had thrown men much bigger than Mike hundreds of times in practice. She had beaten fighters who were stronger, taller, and heavier than she was. Physical size was not what determined who won a fight. What mattered was skill, speed, and determination. And right now, Ronda had all three. She could also see that Mike had been drinking. His eyes were a little glassy, and his movements were slower than they should be. This would make what she was about to do even easier. For just a moment, Ronda thought about her options. She could scream for help and let other people handle this. She could push Mike away and hope he would stop. She could walk away and try to avoid making a scene at the charity event, but then she thought about all the other women who might have to deal with men like Mike. She thought about the young girls who looked up to her and wanted to be strong like her. She thought about what her mother had taught her about standing up for herself. Most importantly, she thought about respect. This man had decided that her body was his to touch whenever he wanted. He had decided that his fun was more important than her comfort and safety. He had decided that being a woman at a public event meant she had to accept being treated badly. Ronda decided he was wrong. Her body finished turning around, and now she was face to face with Mike. He was still smiling, still thinking this was all a big joke. He still had one hand holding her dress. "Hey there, tough girl," Mike said with a stupid grin. "Just having a little fun." Those would be the last words he spoke before Ronda Rousey taught him a lesson about respect that he would never forget. The peaceful charity dinner was about to become very different. And Mike Thompson was about to learn why you should never, ever mess with a woman who has spent her whole life learning how to fight. What happened next took place so fast that most people in the room missed it completely. But for those who were watching, it was like seeing lightning strike. Ronda's right hand moved first. In one smooth motion, she grabbed Mike's wrist, the same hand that was holding her dress. Her grip was strong and sure, like she had done this move 1,000 times before, and she had. Mike felt the pressure on his wrist and started to realize that maybe this wasn't going to be as funny as he thought. But it was already too late for him to change his mind. Using Mike's own forward momentum against him, Ronda stepped to the side and pulled his arm across her body. This was a classic judo move called an arm drag, something she had learned when she was still a teenager. Mike was much bigger than Ronda, but size meant nothing when someone knew how to use leverage and technique. His own weight and the fact that he had been leaning forward to grab her dress made him easy to move. As Ronda pulled his arm, Mike's balance shifted. He tried to step forward to catch himself, but Ronda was already moving to her next technique. She had learned long ago that in a real fight, you never did just one move. You flowed from one technique to another until your opponent was completely controlled. While Mike was stumbling forward, Ronda stepped behind him and wrapped her left arm around his neck. This wasn't a chokehold. She wasn't trying to hurt him. She was just controlling him, making sure he couldn't move or try to grab her again. The whole sequence took maybe 3 seconds from start to finish. One moment Mike was standing upright, grinning and holding Ronda's dress. The next moment he was bent forward with his arm twisted behind him and Ronda's arm around his neck. Mike tried to resist, but he quickly realized he couldn't move at all. Ronda had positioned her body in such a way that any struggle on his part would only make things worse for him. This was the difference between someone who had trained for years and someone who just thought they were tough. "Let me go," Mike said, but his voice came out as more of a squeak than a command. The confident, joking tone was completely gone now. Ronda didn't say anything yet. She was focused on maintaining control and making sure Mike couldn't hurt her or anyone else. But she also wanted him to understand exactly how helpless he was right now. People around them were starting to notice that something was happening. The conversations near the auction tables got quieter as guests turned to see what was going on. Mrs. Patterson, the charity organizer, was one of the first to see what was happening. Her mouth fell open in shock. "Oh my goodness," she whispered. "What is going on?" Mike's fellow officers across the room had stopped laughing completely. Officer Davis dropped his wine glass and it shattered on the floor. Officer Johnson was still recording with his phone, but his hands were shaking. "Mike, what did you do?" Officer Martinez said under his breath, even though he already knew the answer. More people were looking now. Some of the other guests started moving closer, trying to understand what they were seeing. Was this some kind of demonstration? Was someone in danger? Dr. Martinez, the doctor from the children's hospital, started walking over quickly. He thought someone might be hurt and need medical help. But Ronda was completely in control of the situation. Mike was not hurt, just held in a position where he couldn't move or cause any trouble. Her years of training had taught her exactly how much pressure to apply and how to control someone without actually hurting them. Mike tried to twist away, but every movement he made just confirmed how completely stuck he was. Ronda had learned these techniques from the best judo coaches in the world. She had used them against Olympic athletes and professional fighters. A drunk police officer at a charity dinner was not going to break free. "Please," Mike said, and now he sounded scared instead of confident. "I was just joking around. I didn't mean anything by it." This was when Ronda finally spoke. Her voice was calm and clear, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Joking around?" she said. "You think touching a woman without her permission is a joke?" The room around them had gotten much quieter now. Even people who couldn't see what was happening could tell that something serious was going on. Mike tried to explain himself, but he was breathing hard and finding it difficult to talk clearly. I thought, "You're tough, right? I thought you could handle—" "I can handle it," Ronda interrupted. As you can see, she adjusted her grip slightly and Mike made a small sound of discomfort. He was beginning to understand that Ronda could have hurt him badly if she wanted to. The fact that she wasn't hurting him was her choice, not his luck. "The question is," Ronda continued, "can you handle the consequences of what you just did?" By now, almost everyone in the nearby area was watching. Some people had their phones out, recording what was happening. The hotel security guards were moving closer, but they weren't sure what to do. Should they help the police officer? Should they help Ronda? What exactly was going on? Mike's friends finally started moving toward them. Officer Davis looked embarrassed and angry at the same time. He knew that Mike had done something terrible, and now they were all going to look bad because of it. "Ma'am," Officer Davis called out as he approached, "I'm very sorry about this. Officer Thompson has been drinking and he made a very poor decision." Ronda looked at Officer Davis but didn't release Mike. "Yes, he did make a very poor decision," she agreed. "And now he's learning what happens when you make poor decisions about other people's bodies." The entire room was watching now. This was not how anyone had expected the charity dinner to end. Ronda could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her. The entire ballroom had gone quiet except for the soft background music that still played. She had Mike completely under control, but now she had to decide what to do next. She could feel his heart beating fast against her arm. His breathing was quick and scared. The confident, joking man from a few minutes ago was gone. In his place was someone who finally understood how serious this situation really was. For a moment, Ronda thought about her options. She could hold Mike here until the police came to arrest him. She could throw him to the ground and really show everyone what she was capable of. She could make him suffer the way he had made her feel when he violated her privacy. But as she looked around the room, she saw something that changed her mind. She saw young Emma, the brave little girl who had spoken earlier about fighting cancer. Emma was standing with her parents near one of the tables, watching everything with wide, worried eyes. Ronda also saw Mrs. Patterson, who looked terrified that her beautiful charity event was being ruined. She saw doctors and nurses who had spent their whole evening talking about helping people, not hurting them. This was supposed to be a night about making the world better for sick children. It was supposed to be about hope and kindness and community, and while Mike had tried to ruin that with his stupid, disrespectful behavior, Ronda realized she didn't have to let him succeed. She could turn this moment into something positive. She could teach everyone watching, including Mike, a lesson about respect and boundaries without destroying the spirit of the evening. "Listen to me very carefully," Ronda said to Mike, her voice calm but firm. "What you did was wrong. It was illegal. It was disrespectful. And it was stupid." Mike tried to nod, but her arm around his neck made it difficult. "I know," he whispered. "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." "No, you're not sorry yet," Ronda continued. "Right now you're just scared. But you're going to be sorry, because you're going to understand exactly what you did wrong." She adjusted her position slightly, making sure she still had complete control but allowing Mike to breathe more easily. She wanted him to be able to hear and understand every word she was about to say. "You saw me standing here minding my own business, looking at artwork made by sick children," Ronda said. "And you decided that my body was yours to touch. You decided that your entertainment was more important than my privacy and dignity. The room was so quiet that everyone could hear her clearly. Many people were recording with their phones, knowing they were witnessing something important. You did this because you thought you could get away with it, Rhonda continued. You thought that because you're a man and I'm a woman, because you're wearing a uniform, because you were with your friends, that meant you had the right to put your hands on me without asking. Mike made a small sound, like he wanted to say something, but Rhonda wasn't finished. But here's what you didn't understand, she said. Every woman has the right to say no. Every woman has the right to feel safe. Every woman has the right to go to a charity dinner without being grabbed by strangers who think her body is a joke. Dr. Martinez had moved closer and was listening carefully to every word. He was thinking about his own daughter, who was about Rhonda's age, and how angry he would be if someone treated her this way. You also didn't understand that I spent my whole life learning how to defend myself, Rhonda said, not because I wanted to hurt people, but because I knew that someday someone like you would decide that my body belonged to them. She looked around the room at all the people watching. How many women here have been grabbed, touched, or bothered by men who thought it was funny? She asked. Several women in the crowd nodded sadly. Some raised their hands slightly. Mrs. Patterson had tears in her eyes as she remembered her own experiences with unwanted attention. This happens every day, Rhonda said. Women get touched, grabbed, and harassed, and then we're told it's just a joke. We're told we should be flattered. We're told not to make a big deal about it. Mike was starting to understand the full weight of what he had done. This wasn't just about him playing a prank. This was about a much bigger problem that women faced everywhere. But tonight, Rhonda continued, you picked the wrong woman to mess with. Tonight you learned that some women can fight back, and I want everyone in this room to remember this moment. She looked directly at the young girls and women in the crowd. You never have to accept being treated badly, she told them. You never have to smile and pretend it's okay when someone violates your boundaries. You have the right to say no, and you have the right to defend yourselves. Then she looked at the men in the room. And you need to understand that women are not toys for your entertainment. Our bodies are not yours to touch whenever you feel like it. Respect is not optional. Officer Davis stepped forward again. Ma'am, we understand completely. And we're going to make sure Officer Thompson faces consequences for his actions. Can you please release him so we can handle this properly? Rhonda looked at Officer Davis for a long moment. She could see that he was genuinely sorry about what his colleague had done. She could also see that Mike had learned his lesson. He was no longer the confident, joking man who had thought it would be funny to embarrass her. I'm going to let you go, Rhonda said to Mike. But I want you to remember this feeling. I want you to remember what it's like to be powerless while someone else controls your body. And I want you to think about that the next time you're tempted to put your hands on someone without permission. She slowly released her hold on Mike and stepped back. He stumbled forward slightly, then turned around to face her. His face was red with embarrassment and shame. Mike stood there for a moment, rubbing his neck and trying to catch his breath. His face was bright red, not just from being held in Rhonda's grip, but from the shame of what he had done. He looked around the room and saw dozens of people staring at him with disappointment and disgust. These weren't strangers looking at him. These were doctors, community leaders, and good people who had come here to help sick children. And now they had all seen him behave like a fool. Mike started to say something, then stopped. What could he possibly say that would make this better? How could he explain that he had thought it was funny to grab a woman's dress at a charity dinner? Rhonda stood a few feet away from him, smoothing down her dress and fixing her hair. Even after everything that had just happened, she looked calm and composed. Mike, on the other hand, looked like he had just been through a tornado. I'm sorry, Mike finally managed to say. His voice was quiet and shaky. I'm really, really sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. That's the problem, Rhonda replied. You weren't thinking. You saw a woman and decided her body was something you could play with. You didn't think about how I would feel. You didn't think about whether it was right or wrong. You just did it because you wanted to. Officer Davis walked over to Mike and grabbed him by the arm. Come on, Mike, he said firmly. We're leaving. Right now. But Rhonda held up her hand. Wait, she said. I'm not done talking to him. She walked closer to Mike, who seemed to shrink back from her even though she was much smaller than him. The fear in his eyes was clear. He had learned that size didn't matter when someone knew how to fight. Look at me, Rhonda said. Mike raised his eyes to meet hers. Do you have a sister? A mother? A girlfriend? A daughter? Mike nodded slowly. I have a wife, he whispered. And 2 daughters. How old are your daughters? Rhonda asked. 12 and 15, Mike replied. Rhonda let that sink in for a moment. So you have 2 teenage girls at home. And tonight, you thought it was funny to sexually harass a woman in public. Mike's face went even redder when she said the words, sexually harass. He had been trying to think of what he did as just a prank, but hearing it described correctly made him realize how serious it really was. What would you do if someone grabbed your wife's dress at a party? Rhonda asked. What would you do if some man thought your 15-year-old daughter's body was his to touch whenever he felt like it? Mike couldn't answer. The thought of someone treating his family the way he had just treated Rhonda made him feel sick to his stomach. You would be furious, Rhonda said. You would want to protect them. You would want the man who hurt them to face consequences. Am I right? Yes, Mike said quietly. Then why did you think it was okay to do it to me? Rhonda asked. Because I'm famous? Because I'm a fighter? Because I'm not your wife or daughter? Mike shook his head. I don't know, he said. I guess I didn't think about it like that. Well, think about it like that now, Rhonda said. Every woman is someone's daughter. Every woman deserves the same respect you would want for your own family. Mrs. Patterson had been watching everything, and now she stepped forward. Officer Thompson, she said, I think you owe everyone here an apology. This was supposed to be a beautiful evening for a good cause, and your behavior has hurt everyone who worked so hard to make it special. Mike looked around the room again. He saw the disappointed faces of people who had trusted him to keep them safe. He saw young Emma, the brave cancer patient, looking confused and upset. He saw his fellow officers who were clearly angry and embarrassed by what he had done. You're right, Mike said, his voice getting a little stronger. I owe everyone an apology. He cleared his throat and spoke louder so everyone could hear. I want to say sorry to everyone here. What I did was wrong and stupid and disrespectful. I ruined your beautiful evening and I'm ashamed of myself. He turned to look directly at Rhonda. And I especially want to apologize to you. Ms. Rousey, you came here to help sick children and I treated you terribly. There's no excuse for what I did. Rhonda nodded but didn't say anything yet. She was waiting to see if Mike really understood or if he was just saying what he thought people wanted to hear. I have daughters, Mike continued, and I would never want someone to treat them the way I treated you. I don't know why I thought it was okay to do it to you. I guess I let the alcohol and my friends influence me to do something I would never normally do. But you did do it, Rhonda pointed out, and alcohol doesn't make you a different person. It just removes the filter that usually stops you from doing things you want to do anyway. This hit Mike hard because he realized she was right. The alcohol hadn't created the idea of grabbing her dress. It had just made him brave enough to act on it. Officer Davis looked at his colleague with disgust. Mike, you're going to face disciplinary action for this. You might lose your job. You definitely shouldn't be working security at events like this anymore. I understand, Mike said. I deserve whatever consequences come from this. Dr. Martinez stepped forward and addressed the crowd. I think we can all learn something from what Ms. Rousey did tonight, he said. She had every right to be angry. She could have hurt Officer Thompson badly. Instead, she used this as a teaching moment for all of us. People in the crowd began to nod and murmur their agreement. What could have been a violent situation had become something else entirely. A lesson about respect, boundaries, and standing up for what was right. Thank you, Dr. Martinez said to Rhonda. You handled this with more grace than most people would have. Rhonda smiled slightly. I learned a long time ago that real strength isn't about how hard you can hit someone. It's about knowing when to fight and when to teach. Within minutes of the incident, phones all around the ballroom were buzzing with notifications. The videos that people had recorded were already being shared on social media. What had happened at the children's charity dinner was spreading across the internet faster than anyone could have imagined. Sarah, the young nurse who had spoken with Rhonda earlier, was one of the first to post about what she had witnessed. Just saw Ronda Rousey handle harassment at a charity event with more class and strength than I thought possible, she wrote. This is what standing up for yourself looks like. Officer Johnson, who had recorded Mike's prank on his phone, stared at his screen in shock. He had thought he was going to capture something funny to share with friends later. Instead, he had recorded his colleague committing a crime and getting taught a lesson he would never forget. He looked at the video, then looked at Mike, who was still standing there looking ashamed and defeated. Johnson made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He deleted the video. "I'm not going to add to Mike's punishment by putting this on the internet," he said quietly. "He's learned his lesson and his family doesn't need to see this forever." But other people had recorded the incident too, and those videos were already online and spreading fast. Within an hour, news websites were picking up the story. Within 2 hours, it was trending on Twitter with hashtags like "Your Ronda Respect" and "Your Charity Incident." The story that was spreading wasn't just about a celebrity fighting back against harassment. It was about how Ronda had handled the situation with restraint and used it as a teaching moment. People were impressed that she hadn't hurt Mike when she easily could have. "Ronda Rousey shows incredible restraint while teaching important lesson about consent," read one. Headline, "Fighter turned teacher. How Ronda Rousey handled harassment at charity."
Event, read another. But
not all the attention was positive for everyone involved. Mike's name and face were appearing in news stories and social media posts. People were calling him out for his behavior, and some were saying much worse things about him than Ronda had. His wife, Linda, first learned about what happened when a friend sent her a link to a news article. She sat in her kitchen reading the story with growing horror and embarrassment. "How could he do something like this?" she said to herself. "At a charity event for children?" Their daughters, Emma and Sophie, found out when their friends started sending them links and asking if the Mike Thompson in the news was their father. The girls were mortified and confused. Their dad had always taught them to respect other people. How could he have done something so disrespectful? Back at the charity event, the evening was slowly returning to normal. Mrs. Patterson had made an announcement thanking everyone for their understanding and asking them to continue focusing on the important cause that had brought them together. But the conversations around the room had definitely changed. People were talking about what they had witnessed, and many were sharing their own stories about harassment and unwanted attention. "I've been grabbed like that more times than I can count," one woman told her table. "Usually I just try to ignore it and move on. It was amazing to see someone actually stand up and do something about it." "My daughter is in high school," said another guest. "I'm going to show her this video when I get home. I want her to know that she never has to accept being treated that way." Dr. Martinez was having similar thoughts. "I work with teenage patients all the time," he told his colleagues. "So many of them, especially the girls, have stories about being bothered or touched by boys who think it's funny. Maybe this incident can help start some important conversations." Emma, the young cancer patient who had spoken earlier, approached Ronda with her parents. "Ms. Rousey," she said shyly, "I just wanted to say that you're even braver than I thought. The way you handled that man was really cool." Ronda knelt down to Emma's level. "Thank you, sweetie," she said. "But you know what? You're braver than I am. Fighting cancer takes more courage than anything I've ever done." Emma's parents were grateful that Ronda had handled the situation without violence. "Our daughter looks up to you so much," Emma's mother said. "We're glad she got to see you use your strength to teach instead of to hurt." Meanwhile, law enforcement agencies around the country were already beginning to discuss the incident. Police chiefs and training officers were using it as an example of how officers should not behave, both on and off duty. Captain Rodriguez at Mike's police department had already gotten several calls from reporters asking for comment. He knew that Mike would face serious consequences, possibly including losing his job. "This kind of behavior is completely unacceptable," Captain Rodriguez told his officers at an emergency meeting the next morning. "Officer Thompson's actions reflect badly on all of us, and we will be reviewing our training procedures to make sure something like this never happens again." The incident was also being discussed in women's self-defense classes across the country. Instructors were using Ronda's response as an example of how to handle harassment, not just the physical techniques, but the mental approach of staying calm and using the situation to educate others. "What Ronda did was perfect," explained instructor Maria Santos to her class of teenage girls. "She protected herself, she controlled the situation, and she made her point without causing unnecessary harm. That's what real self-defense looks like." Social media was full of women sharing their own stories of harassment and praising Ronda for her response. Many were also discussing the broader issues of consent and respect that the incident had brought to Light. This isn't just about one drunk cop at a party, wrote blogger Jessica Chen. This is about the thousands of women who get grabbed, touched, and harassed every day by men who think our bodies are public property. The hashtag #RespectWomen was trending, with people sharing stories and discussing how society could do better at teaching men to respect women's boundaries. But perhaps the most important conversations were happening in homes around the country, where parents were talking to their children about what they had seen and what it meant. The incident at the charity dinner had become much more than just one woman defending herself. It had become a catalyst for important discussions about respect, boundaries, and how people should treat each other. 6 months after the charity dinner incident, the effects were still being felt in ways that no one could have predicted that night. Mike Thompson was no longer a police officer. He had been fired from the department after a disciplinary hearing that made headlines in local newspapers. The video of his behavior had been shown as evidence, and there was no question about what had happened. But Mike's story didn't end there. After losing his job and spending weeks feeling sorry for himself, he had made a decision that surprised everyone who knew him. He started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping with security and maintenance work. At first, the women at the shelter were suspicious of him. Why would a man who had harassed a woman want to help at a place like this? But Mike was patient and respectful, and gradually, people began to see that he was genuinely trying to make up for what he had done. "I can't undo what I did to Ms. Rousey," Mike told the shelter director, Mrs. Williams. "But maybe I can spend the rest of my life making sure other women feel safe." Mike also started speaking at police training sessions about his experience. He would tell new officers about the worst night of his career and what it had taught him about respect and boundaries. "I thought I was just having fun," he would tell the young officers. "I thought because she was famous and tough it was okay to treat her differently. I was wrong and it cost me everything. Don't make the same mistake I did." His family had struggled with the shame and embarrassment of what he had done. His wife Linda had considered divorcing him, and his daughters had been bullied at school by kids who had seen the videos online. But as time passed and Mike worked to become a better person, his family began to heal. His daughters, Emma and Sophie, were proud that their father was trying to help other women, instead of just feeling sorry for himself. "My dad made a really bad mistake," 15-year-old Sophie told her friends, "but he's working hard to make it right. That's what good people do when they mess up." Rhonda, meanwhile, had used the incident to start important conversations wherever she went. At speaking events, interviews, and social media posts, she talked about the importance of respecting boundaries and standing up for yourself. That night at the charity dinner wasn't just about one man behaving badly, she said in an interview 6 months later. It was about a much bigger problem in our society. Too many women accept harassment because they think they have to. Too many men think women's bodies are their entertainment. The charity event itself had actually benefited from all the attention. Mrs. Patterson reported that donations to the Children's Hospital had increased dramatically after the incident. People who had never heard of their work before were now regular supporters. "Sometimes good things can come from bad situations," Mrs. Patterson said. "What happened that night was terrible, but the conversations it started have helped a lot of people." Dr. Martinez had implemented new training at the hospital for dealing with harassment and inappropriate behavior. The incident had made him realize that even in professional settings, women often faced unwanted attention and needed better support. Young Emma, the cancer patient who had spoken at the dinner, was now in remission and doing well. She often talked about that night as a turning point in her understanding of what it meant to be strong. "Ms. Rousey showed me that being strong isn't just about fighting a disease," Emma said. "It's about standing up for what's right and helping other people be strong too." The video of the incident was still used in self-defense classes and women's safety workshops around the world. Instructors appreciated that it showed both the physical and mental aspects of defending yourself. "Rhonda could have seriously hurt that man," explained self-defense instructor Carlos Mendez. "But she chose restraint and education instead. That's what real martial arts training teaches you. When to fight and when to teach." Police departments across the country had updated their training programs to include discussions about appropriate behavior both on and off duty. The incident had become a case study in how quickly poor decisions could destroy a career and reputation. Captain Rodriguez, Mike's former boss, used the incident in training sessions. Officer Thompson was a good cop for 8 years, he would tell new recruits. But one moment of bad judgment cost him everything. Remember that when you're tempted to do something you know is wrong. The broader conversation about harassment and consent that the incident had sparked was still continuing. Schools were using it to teach teenagers about boundaries and respect. Parents were having difficult but important conversations with their children about how to treat others. Social media continued to reference the incident whenever discussions about harassment came up. The hashtags during Ronda Respect and Respect Women were still used regularly, and Ronda's response was held up as an example of how to handle a bad situation with grace and strength, but perhaps the most lasting impact was on the countless women who had seen the video and felt inspired to stand up for themselves. Self-defense class enrollment had increased around the country, and women were reporting harassment more often instead of just accepting it. Seeing Ronda handle that situation gave me courage to report my boss when he kept making inappropriate comments, wrote one woman online. I realized I didn't have to just put up with it. Another woman shared, "My daughter watches that video whenever she's feeling scared or powerless. It reminds her that she has the right to say no and defend herself." Ronda herself reflected on the incident as one of the most important moments of her career, even though it had happened outside the fighting ring. "I've won a lot of fights," she said in a recent interview, "but that night at the charity dinner might be the most important thing I've ever done. Not because I stopped one man from behaving badly, but because it started conversations that needed to happen." The children's charity dinner had returned to being an annual event, more successful than ever. Mrs. Patterson always included a moment in her speech to talk about respect and kindness, making sure that everyone understood the values that the evening represented. "We come together to help children," she would say, "and part of helping children is showing them how adults should treat each other with respect and dignity." Mike Thompson continued his volunteer work at the women's shelter, and eventually, he was offered a job there as a security coordinator. It paid much less than his police job had, but he found it more meaningful. "I spent 8 years as a cop thinking I was protecting people," Mike said, "but I learned that real protection means making sure everyone feels safe and respected. That's what I try to do now." The incident that had started as a stupid prank at a charity dinner had become something much bigger, a catalyst for important changes in how society talked about respect, boundaries, and the treatment of women. And it all began because one woman refused to accept that her body was someone else's joke.